When you're a public school teacher and content brings up some sticky questions about faith or God, how do you respond? We talk all about that in today's episode. Well, welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. I am here today with Ashley, who is one of our Teach for the Heart mentors. So, Ashley, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you may notice, first of all, wait a second, you're not Linda. No, I am not. Linda is currently on a sabbatical. She is taking a much deserved and needed trip. And so you will be seeing her soon. But a few episodes you watch or listen to this summer may not have her in there, but no worries, she will be back soon. Today, we're doing a teacher talk episode. We have a teacher submitted question that we're going to go over. And I definitely wanted Ashley to be on this episode with me because we both have a little bit of public school background. So, certainly looking forward to getting into this question today. So, here is our teacher submitted question. Teaching in a public school, I wish I could tell my students directly about Jesus. I'm also a science teacher, and some concepts create more questions about science versus God when it's really God who made science. How do I go about this in class? I definitely understand why you submitted this question because, as a former public school science teacher, this is definitely a concern that comes up. I can think of even a specific scenario when we were doing our unit on space. And so naturally, the topic of creation comes up. And we were watching a video, and the video talked about the Big Bang Theory. I remember some of my students just kind of like giving me a look, and it just was like, we'll talk about it later, you know? And so I knew there was quite a few students in my class who also were Christians. And so by the time we got to the end of the video, we talked about, okay, what are some takeaways? And of course, I had some where it did bother them, understandably so. And so they'd raise their hand and be like, well, I don't believe that that's the way the universe was created. And so what I did in that moment was focus more on this is possibly how the universe was created, not
Mhm,
the who created it. And
mhm,
so I know creation obviously of like something that's very personal to us. We know what we believe, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And
mhm.
so yeah, whenever you teach in a public school, these are things that are gonna come up naturally in our curriculum, and so, yeah, at least from my perspective, I was like, "Hey, guys, this is called the Big Bang Theory. It's a theory for a reason. Scientists can't even agree on what is true," right? They debate it all the time, so
Mhm.
you are absolutely allowed to believe what you believe. This video mentioned this doesn't mean that's necessarily what I believe, but hey, this is about the how it happened, not necessarily the who. So that's just one example that came to mind for me. And so, Ashley, I know you've taught in a public school. So have you had this situation come up with you before?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was an English teacher, so it wasn't quite so technical, but
Hmm.
your example actually gave me, an idea about, like, one of the things we can do as
Hmm.
teachers is, open up our students' minds to seeing the possibility. So we can't preach necessarily from the front of the classroom, but, like, especially in the area of science, like, we as a culture often assume that scientists have it all figured out. And because, there's all this evidence and textbooks very much present it as though this is fact. And
Hmm.
the reality is that, like you said to your students, there's a lot of theories in science. And so, whether the subject is science or any other subject, I think from the front of the room, we are allowed to point out those kind of logical fallacies and say, okay, so it is a theory, or this is a perspective, but there are other perspectives, and a theory is just a theory. And so, even though we can't necessarily say, have you considered, the biblical view on this? We can
Right.
say there are other views and open their minds from that perspective. And I think as a teacher, like, I know I would get really panicky if I had to do that on the fly. So I think if I were in this teacher's shoes, I would prayerfully construct a couple, go-to responses that you feel you can say from the front of the room that do that kind of crack open the student's mindset a little bit so that they're maybe more receptive to a faith response or to other views. And so just kind of coming up with those almost like pocket phrases, but for this
Hmm.
situation where you can say exactly like you said, like, it's called a theory for a reason, or that's not what everyone believes. This is one
Hmm.
perspective. And those kind of go-to sayings that we can kind of just feel confident that from the front of the room, we're not preaching, but we aren't also being false to ourselves and our own beliefs.
Yeah. And I love that you said prayerfully too, because in those moments when they hit you with those questions, if you're not expecting it, like me, I would get kind of like,
Yeah.
how am I supposed to respond to this? Like, what can I legally say? What can I not? And
Hmm.
so if you're prayerful ahead of time, especially in an area like science, just asking like the Holy Spirit, just speak through me. Like he
Hmm.
knows what you can and cannot say, right? So like just ask him to be with you and to give you the right answers in those moments. And obviously, in a public school, we're not called to preach at the kids. But I think a lot of times, really, the way we show Jesus to these students, whether they're believers or not, is just through the fruits of the Spirit. So,
Hmm.
showing them kindness, showing them love, showing patience, which is sometimes very challenging. But all
Hmm.
of those things absolutely are going to show Jesus to them, even if you're not preaching Jesus to them, if that makes sense.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation, and they want to let you know that applications are now open for the 2026 Faith and Nation Student Forum. Each fall, the Herzog Foundation hosts an incredible 4-day retreat for outstanding high school seniors from Christian schools and homeschool co-ops. The Faith and Nation Student Forum gives students the opportunity to strengthen their Christian worldview and engage with government leaders. Students can also participate in teen challenges, outdoor adventures, and social events designed to build leadership skills and lasting friendships. The Herzog Foundation covers the cost of the retreat, all except travel, making this an amazing opportunity for your high school seniors. Help them apply. Applications close September 18th. Learn more and apply at herzogfoundation.com. Now, back to our program.
Yeah, absolutely. And like circling back to that idea of prayer too, like we can pray for these kids. We might be the only person in their life that is praying for them. And so they can feel hard to not be able to share Jesus with them directly, but we can still have a great influence, not only by modeling the fruits of the Spirit and being that different person, that person who loves them and is patient with them, but we can also pray for them. And we may never see the fruit of that prayer, but we know that prayer is powerful. And so that's something we can do that they'll never know about. We may never know how it impacts them. But that's a way that we can kind of help them without them being aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like planting those seeds. And like you say, sometimes you do see them come to fruition. It's such a special moment. And then other times you don't, but you just trust that God will take care of the rest. So
Hmm.
yeah, I really appreciate this question being sent in because when you're in a public school, it definitely brings up some concerns because
Hmm.
you don't wanna say the wrong thing, but you do still wanna show Jesus to these kids, like, that's what we're called to do, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's just going about it in maybe a different way than versus if you were to teach in a Christian, private school.
Hmm. Yeah.
So don't be afraid to show Jesus to those kids, and if you're still kind of concerned about, "Well, what can I actually say?" I definitely would recommend looking up our previous podcast. It's number 354. So Linda spoke with someone over at Christian Educators, and they really got into the nitty gritty about what you legally can and cannot
Hmm.
say. And so if you're concerned about that, absolutely would certainly recommend checking out that episode just to get into those details.
Hmm.
Ashley, did you have any other things you wanted to add before we sign off?
I think just remember that you're making a difference and remember that there are many ways to point students to Jesus. And they're not all going to look like using your words.
Absolutely. Well, this episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. All views and opinions are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us today, and we look forward to being with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.